Hello, everybody out there in radio land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. As always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 WIDR or Western Michigan University, no matter how dope or insightful they may be. Again, if you haven't ever heard this before, this is our working class politics and media oversight talk show where we talk about what's going on here in the community, state of Michigan, the so-called United States, and the rest of the world from a working class perspective. And we've got some perspectives on the show. We're joined by the full news team today. Nora and Lawrence are both joining me. How are y'all doing on this mid-August afternoon?
I am doing okay. It's just another day ready to talk about what's going on in this crazy world of ours.
Man, blessed and highly favored in so many ways.
All right. What wonderful to hear from both of y'all. So we're gonna kind of jump right in. We've got some follow up to this is a big national story with Michigan specific implications, and you've probably heard me talk about it 2 weeks ago. But Trump, as some people may have heard, has finally been indicted for trying to overthrow the government. You know,
Among other
uh,
things.
among other things. I mean, there's a whole lot of other things he's been indicted for. Um, but yeah, he was recently indicted, and as we also reported earlier, some local Michigan politicians and people involved in Michigan Republican politics have been directly indicted by Dana Nessel for the role they had in the whole elector scheme, which uh,
Shout out to Dana Nessel for doing the Lord's work. That's all I want to say.
For real.
yeah, we're going to be talking. So I'm going to be referencing an article from the Messenger, talking a little bit about kind of got a broader conversation about how this ties into the the conservative framing of this as assault on our rights and our liberty and kind of appeal to grievance politics. But yeah, I think it is worth kind of just my scattered thoughts about the broader indictment and these people being indicted here in Michigan is, you know, one of the interesting things that has happened since the January 6th, I would call it, some people have heard kind of America's uh, analog to the beer hall push, it was 10 years before the Nazi regime took over Germany, and it was largely ridiculed as a very ridiculous, silly attempt to overthrow their government at the time. And one of the interesting things about this, just thinking through this, is is it's very interesting. If we all remember news coverage of that event and directly from the words of people like Donald Trump and Giuliani amping up a crowd full of militia types, white supremacists, hard right, MAGA adherents. This is a fight. We have to stop them, et cetera, et cetera. Using pretty clear language of what they were trying to incite the crowd to do. Um, and the interesting thing to me is this kind of pivot that GOP has done. They've really tried every propaganda angle you could think of, minimizing it. First they said it was secretly Antifa, that didn't really stick. They said it was the right thing to do, or later on saying it wasn't actually a riot. That's Tucker Carlson's whole cherry picking certain footage to be like, these are people who were just calmly ambling around the Capitol, ha ha ha, and of course
I saw
footage.
that Joe Rogan tried to pass it off as most of the most of the insurrectionists being feds somehow. Like there's that many people on the AI that would start a fake on the FBI that would start a
Yeah,
fake insurrection in the first place.
yeah.
It did come out. I do want to say that because Joe Rogan's only half right. It did come out that there were former police officers and military personnel that was a part of the riot. One of the people that actually got the longest sentence was I think DC police or a DC officer. I think they got 10 years.
Yeah,
So there were police officers.
Fair point. Yes.
Yeah. So no. So was most of the crowd cops or military personnel? No. Were some of them? Yeah.
yeah.
But the
and
point is, it
it's-
wasn't an inside job. Like, this
Yeah.
is
Yeah,
clearly
it
people who are
wasn't-
trying
it
to do
wasn't-
this.
It was not an inside job. I think the thing that makes me laugh about this whole story, and I'm sorry for cutting you off, Andy,
It's
is
all
that
go ahead. But
we have watched Donald Trump and his crew of misfits admit crimes in public. Like because I want to give y'all context. In America, a lot of black entertainers, like rappers, they have gone to jail for lyrics that they've said in songs that may reference a crime, that they may or may not have been a part of. Trump has admitted his crimes in public, like in pure detail. The I just want 11,000 some votes phone call. The
leaked audio about the documents.
Yeah, the documents. I grabbed them by they don't wait. I lied about not having documents. It came out that they were in my house and in the bathroom. And to add to the story, I don't know if y'all saw that the CNN Politics had that the Georgia prosecutor has evidence that Trump's teams were behind the voting system breach. That's a part of the new things that he's getting indicted for in Georgia. Like, his team is literally caught with their hand in the cookie jar. So this man, like, it's like if I was going to I was going to rob a bank. My face is in the camera. I have a note saying, "Hey, I was here."
You say your full name and your social security number while you're robbing the bank.
and then I say, hey y'all, this is free speech. You know what I'm saying? Like that's pretty much their defense. Like, hey, I
have a right to tell you to put your hands up in the air and put the money in the bag, right?
Yeah, hold up.
My First Amendment
this is a hold
rights.
up, guys. Wave your hands in the air and give me all the money in the safe. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like that's basically their defense. And you know that it's bad because even Fox News anchors are like, hey, you know Trump's a liar. It's like, yeah, we know he's a liar. So was he lying before about not losing, or lying about the fact that, yeah, he knew he was trying to steal the election? So much so that when the rioter said hang his vice president, he said, nah, I'm okay with it. He had it coming. What?
Yeah.
Get your mans. Get your mans. Get your mans.
Yeah, and just kind of circling back too about the whole the idea of like FBI infiltration, which is a theme that may come back up again later on the show. But it's interesting to see from like kind of a propaganda angle how it takes little bits of truth about American history and then just kind of turns it all up on its head, which is to say, so yeah, there is a history of people from the FBI, CIA infiltrating various groups, and sometimes on the far left, sometimes on the far right. That was even part of the Whitmer kidnapping plot. That was part of that whole story. But it's important to keep in mind too is they've taken the idea. So again, a large part of the reason there was a lot of former cops and military personnel at the J6 insurrection is because they believed in those politics. I mean, the Oath Keepers is literally a group of former military and sheriffs and stuff who were politically behind Donald Trump. So it's kind of like, again, it's self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like, look at all these feds and stuff who were at the insurrection. It's like, yeah, because you literally recruited them with your right-wing politics.
The police and to a lesser extent the military, they just tend to attract more people who are either sensitive to power or have like right-wing tendencies.
Yeah,
that's not hyperbole. there was a study that came out I think it was a year or two ago, and they were looking at the voting patterns of police officers, and most of the voting patterns of police officers are right wing, right, and not just fiscal conservative right wing, but right wing authoritarian. And when you have white supremacists whose ideas are based in fascist authoritarianism, they're going to go to a place where they are, one, protected by state power, which the police are with qualified immunity, things of that nature, and you give them a way to uh, not just push but act on their preconceived notions and ideology, which is they're superior than the rest of us. Then these class traitors, which is what those police officers are, will then act on those base principles, which is their beliefs, their right wing white supremacist beliefs. And it makes sense that they are going to go towards the person who says, when Mexico is sending their best, they're not sending their best. They bring drugs, they're crying their way face. I'm pretty sure that there's some good people. They're gonna go towards that guy. That guy who says, "Hey, it's the brown person, or it's this woke ideology. It's the gay person who's pushing things onto your kids." They're gonna go towards that because economically they're not, because there's no other thing for them to latch onto outside of the hatred. There's not a policy that will materially fix their lives, because those policies are things that we agree with. They're focusing on their identity politics and hate.
Yeah, exactly. And I think another angle of this is, when we talk about somebody who infiltrates for the purpose of trying to agitate or instigate violence. Like this is well documented, especially we look at COINTELPRO in their efforts to infiltrate the Black Panthers, and they were always trying to encourage the Black Panther Party to engage in like violent terroristic acts, basically things that would make make it easier for the federal government to prosecute them. We've seen this all the way up to present day. There's some great investigations a few years ago about trying to rope people with rope people into extreme like jihadist ideology, and like FBI informants literally like giving them ideas for plots they could do, that kind of thing. And the thing is, though, that works when you're trying to basically exploit either like a small group or a small cell of people to engage in some adventurous act that's going to get an overall movement in trouble. But when you're talking about a large scale event, public riots, like what happened on January 6th, you can't just like cultivate that with a couple of informants. And in fact, if you want to point to the people who were trying to urge the crowd into violence, it was literally the president and his attorney. I mean, I guess they're feds. If you're president for 4 years, that's about as fed as you can get. But you know, but yeah,
Donald
there.
Trump is a Fed? What?
Yeah, but it's fun. It's again funny to hear conservatives cry conspiracy with so much of J6. It may be like the most well documented kind of like attack of that nature in history. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of video footage that corroborate like all the stuff that we're saying here. And so what happens in response is you have people in the GOP, and particularly the Michigan GOP, who cry foul and say that they are being oppressed for facing the consequences of their actions. I'm going to read real quick. So Matt Maddock, his wife, Michonne Maddock, was former chair of Michigan GOP and also one of the 16 fake electors who was criminally charged by Dana Nessel. He basically said in this private call, again, kind of amp up in the people on the call and by virtue of the fact the GOP base. If the government continues to weaponize these departments against conservatives and the citizens that are then the taxpayers, you know what's going to happen in this country. Other attendees shouted various possibilities, violent ones. Maddock answered his own question. Someone's going to get so pissed off they're going to shoot someone. That's what's going to happen. Or we're going to have a civil war or some sort of revolution. That's where this is. That's where this is going. And people in the state of Michigan have basically responded by standing up with these electors who literally and legally did something very illegal. There was a kind of fundraiser party Mad Maddock hosted just days after the indictment for the 16 or so people who were indicted. Um, and basically an amping up of the rhetoric that's Dana Nessel saying that she's politicizing the position of attorney general, or she's used basically again it's accusing the other side of that of which you are guilty, and basically painting her to be somebody who is politicizing it to the point of the way that Trump was often politicizing it. And of course, you can't have gross overreaction without a gross Holocaust comparison. Matt Maddock went on to say that the state government is dismantling Trump and his campaign one person at a time. Said it is aimed at discouraging people from questioning subsequent elections, and used allusions to the Nazis' use of gas chambers during the Holocaust. And all of this is again about painting themselves as the victims of government overreach, when it's literally like if you're following the letter of the law, you would have to prosecute people for committing this attempted overthrow of the government. And I guess what really gets me on a personal level is like, I think about all the times leftists, movements, and organizations have done something illegal. And there's always like one of the first big political things I did was something called Democracy Spring. And it's like, we are going to commit civil disobedience. We are going to get arrested to protest the influence of money in politics. And we all got arrested and we paid our court fees, or we went to court, or something. Those is like, we understood what the consequences of those actions would be. And like the funny thing about this is like, if you're going to trip to overthrow the government, there's probably going to be consequences. Now, the cynical part of me thought for a while maybe there wasn't going to be consequences. The whole thing of like, oh, we just need to move past this as a nation, blah blah blah. Yeah, there's probably going to be consequences. Like if somebody on the left did something analogous to January 6th, I think they would go into it with the expectation that they were probably going to spend the rest of their life in prison, if not get shot. So yeah,
Wait. What if that was anybody that did not have the complexion of mayonnaise that did that at the Capitol, they would have got shot. Not only would they have gotten shot, the NAACP would have to come out and say they would have tried to force the BLM and NAACP to say they stand against this. They would have had press conferences, victim blaming the victims that were shot, saying that they were that the cops were justified in doing so. That look how dangerous these black identity extremists are. Like if that would have been if those people that would attack the Capitol would have been BLM or some Muslim or some Islamic group or some Latino activist group or any type of any other organization in this country that wasn't white right wingers, we would have had an entirely different conversation. Like, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think it goes to show, like, again, the historical ignorance on the right, but also the way that, like, again, the fact that the way that January 6th played out is itself a testament to the amount of privilege these people have when they were dealing with the gravity of what they tried to do. They were, they played kid gloves with them. Again, it's been often said, like what kind of violence would, leftists have faced trying to do the same thing. And I think, a good example of that, you can actually point to an event in history for an example of exactly how that played out. So, think of so Reconstruction. Civil War ends, Confederacy is defeated, and for a solid decade and a half, you actually start seeing Black political power building in the South, and you start seeing elected representatives, organizations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These people overthrew the Confederacy. There's literally a war about it, and over time, they the gains of Reconstruction were dialed back by one of the biggest waves of white supremacist terrorism in history. The Klan, again, a lot of the more white supremacist elements of the federal government, over time ended up dialing back the gains of Reconstruction, and within about 10 years, all these states that were essentially had become these independent had created independent Black politics and independent Black commerce had been crushed by white terrorism and by people sympathetic within the government. So yeah, that's exactly how it plays out when you are not already part and parcel of this kind of is this white colonizer hegemony that we saw play out on January 6th. And you get to be free and play the victim when you know what you tried to do and everybody else tries to do, knows what you try to do. But we have to kind of dance around it because, oh no, there might be a civil war, there might be unrest, all this other stuff. And I mean, we're already at that point, there's and there have been points in our history where this has already literally happened. So like threatening that, oh, we're gonna have a civil war about it, that doesn't really impress me as a leftist because, points for history like this is all old hat stuff. We know what this kind of settler white majority is capable of when they feel like they're backed against the fence. And what's really different nowadays is they have this whole media apparatus where they can try to push this narrative that they're being oppressed by the government for facing the consequences of their actions.
I think that's this is also like to both your point and Lawrence's, like this is very much an American problem for there to not be a sufficient response to the January 6th insurrection, but like, not just because of the whole racial element of it, of like white people get away with everything, but like again, like with the feds being in bed with that same sort of violence. For example, in other countries there were similar insurrections that were attempted, one in Brazil and another in Germany. Now, both of them not only failed spectacularly, but like law enforcement was able to like crack down on them a lot more harshly, and they got everyone arrested. They got everyone. Like not even close to something like that happened in the U.S. In fact, Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil, who is trying to do his equivalent of January 6th, has been banned from running for office for at least a decade. And now he's hiding out in Florida because that's where I guess a lot of U.S.-backed dictators like to go hide when things don't work out for them.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, what happened in Brazil is a perfect example. Like, they do not pass go, do not collect $200, go straight to, believe it or not, straight to jail. And yeah, it is you really have to think about how ridiculous it is that we still have a lot of, and this is on networks like CNN, like the main liberal networks, these debates about whether or not is it an encroachment on Donald Trump's First Amendment rights to have him prosecuted, or should we, would it be wrong to not let him run for office? And it's like standing anywhere else. It's like, yeah, if you try to overthrow the government, you probably shouldn't be allowed to run for anything again. Like that, at
Yeah.
minimum, if not like some serious jail time. So I think, yeah, kind of.
Okay. So just to that point, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just to that point, you can say the election was had fraud. There's no problem with that, right? We're gonna make this clear. You can say that there was fraud. You can ask for a recount. There was multiple recounts. You can you can uh you can say I feel like I haven't lost. All those things are not illegal. You want to know what is illegal? Calling people and asking them to help you find votes that do not exist. That's illegal. Uh, uh, breaking into the voting rolls so that you disenfranchise other American voters. That's illegal. And those are all things that Trump did. Those are all things that he admitted to. And we had in setting up fake legislators to recertify the election in your favor, like what happened in Michigan and in other states like Pennsylvania, and why some of those people are now facing serious jail and prison time for lying and defrauding the country. Now, yes, Trump has defrauded a lot of people. Trump University, Trump Steaks, Trump Airplanes. He's defrauded a lot of people. He has scammed his way to being president. But when you try to overturn democracy, you went too far in your scam. Because that means you have to have other people who are unwilling to participate now participate.
Yeah, exactly.
This one hits different. That's it.
Yeah, and I think we're gonna keep covering this story as it unfolds, but I think it is a very interesting precedent. I think Dana Nessel was maybe the first AG to go after those fake electors in their respective state. Which again, in our climate, I mean, her coworker almost got kidnapped by some of these yachts. So that does take a certain level of courage to do, and it should be commended. Again, for trying to hold these people accountable for what they did.
You look
that
it's
that would
no,
also
you can have sorry, you have the right to say that you feel like you didn't lose. I have a right to say that I have a right to go into the bank and say I want some money. I don't have a right to go into the bank and say I want your money. There's a difference. I can go into a bank and say, hey, this is a nice place. I should put my hands up. I don't have a right to say, hey, give me everything that's in the drawer and you put your hands up. There's a difference. Things hit different.
It does. I think the fact that that Dana Nessel was one of the was probably the only AG to prosecute these fake electors that popped up around the country. It's one huge props to her, but also it does kind of explain at least partially why the Michigan GOP has been so bloodthirsty lately. But
they've been literally fighting each other.
I don't know if you saw
that. Oh my God. Yeah.
I don't know if you saw that. We didn't cover it, but I wanted to say as a quick hit because we haven't been around in a few days. There were literally video of some Kalamazoo representatives, some Grand Rapids GOP representatives, getting into a kerfuffle, a brouhaha, some fisticuffs. When Jake from the Young Turks was talking about there was a study that said a lot of GOP, and this is not hypothetical, a lot of GOP and right-wing voters say that it's time for violence. They're not joking. They're actually going after each other too.
If a fascist tells you they're going to do some fascist stuff, you got to believe them.
Facts.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the subject, however, of fighting and I do want to I think this is a good time to pivot to a story about a white mob that didn't succeed down in Montgomery, Alabama.
Mm-hmm. We didn't talk about this story. We don't talk about this story.
So pull up a chair. This is a good one for those who haven't heard about it.
I mean, you've probably all seen the memes by now, but there's some interesting juicy bits on it. There's definitely some race and class dynamics with the whole was it the Battle of Birmingham. I know it's been referred to as a couple of things. So, uh, but
That,
yeah,
because someone did not want to park their boat somewhere else. Like, man,
mm,
y'all fought. We're getting into fights over parking spaces.
Not only that, so the reason why they asked the boat to move was because they were gonna dock a much larger boat with like multiple times the amount of people, like to, they just wanted to move this tiny 4-person boat. And that that felt, I guess, was justification for these weird racists to bring 4 people to jump a security guard.
okay. I think just let's
Oh
rewind a little
man.
bit. I want to go over the context of this before we
Right.
do go deeper. But so if you haven't heard, so Birmingham, Alabama, there was essentially a riverboat captain. This is an important. This will come back later why I'm mentioning this, but it was a municipally owned, city owned riverboat. It's kind of part of the civic society of Birmingham. Average people can get on this boat, right? The captain of that boat asked this smaller boat, full of a bunch of white people, to move it, asked politely, so that the larger municipally owned boat could park. And instead, the white boaters assaulted him, knocked him on the ground, started saying a bunch of said the N word, a bunch of other racist epithets, etc. And as anybody who's been on social media last week has seen, so those white people tried it in a small town, and subsequently, people from the boat, people in the community, some people literally swimming up to the dock. Came to this boat captain's rescue and subdued the assailants. With fists and kicks and folding chairs. And There's a couple of takes. There's this, one thing that I read an op-ed from Truth Out that brought up some really good points and said historically it is really significant that this is a story where we clearly have um, both the public and the officers responding to the scene um, correctly assessing these white racists as the aggressors and the city employee as the victim. And so often we've seen similar situations where black people are literally just defending themselves and end up getting prosecuted or assaulted by the police
Or
and it
killed.
or killed.
There was
Yeah.
a or the story that comes to mind. Sorry to interrupt, but story that comes to mind is the black security guard that was that stopped the mass shooter. He literally had security on his vest. He had a gun. The cops came and the cops shot him. That
Yeah.
literally happened. Like, that's not a joke. That's not a punchline. That's real facts. And this is that one time when the cops saw who were the real ops in this situation and was like, you know what? These people actually did this work. The thing that I liked the most was watching the other videos of the other black people in the area or the other bystanders that saw this man who's doing his job get assaulted, and they were like, "Oh, that's what we're on. Well, it's up and it's stuck now. Y'all want to fight?
Yeah,
I got
and
you."
it's like it's really interesting because like you see America play out in real time. It's so this white mob who felt historically entitled that we can just beat up and terrorize black people and get away with it. I was just talking about Reconstruction and whatnot, and there's that historical legacy of white people's impunity of inflicting terrorism on black people that bleeds into the actions of these overtanned uh, um, white goons. And
I mean, we're talking about Alabama, and we haven't said anything about Tulsa. Like, think about
yeah,
it.
mm-hmm.
Like that's the legacy of Tulsa, of some in Tulsa, Oklahoma. For those who don't know about Black Wall Street, you had the race riots that happened there, where a city of well-to-do middle-class black folks were living their best lives, trying to just survive in a system that does not like them. And instead of letting that town thrive and bring more money into the general, into the greater economy, the white people in that area destroyed the city. They bombed that city for 3 days. We still have survivors from that massacre alive to this day. And that's not something that happened. It's not something that happened during. It's not something that happened where we're talking about Nat Turner and the slave rebellions. We're talking about something that happened in our grandparents' lives.
Also worth mentioning that I saw that those same survivors did try to sue. I don't know who it was specifically, but they recently lost a court case asking for reparations for the bombing of Black Wall Street specifically, and they did not succeed, unfortunately.
I mean, yeah, I was sad to see that. That is something that we didn't get a chance to talk about. But like, when we talk about truth, reconciliation, we talk about reparations. These people are still alive. Their families and friends were killed during the massacre. So this is not a hypothetical that they were harmed. We know they were harmed. We have records of it. And the fact that our country is like, nah, you're good. Just get over it. It happened so long ago. It's not something that it's something that I'm sad to see is the norm. That's the norm, right? It's hard to get justice when it's not going to be handed to us. We're going to have to take it. And this is just another fight on that thread.
As Shirley Chisholm, who famously was one of the first Black women to run for president, once said, if they don't offer you a chair, if they don't offer you a chair at the table, bring a folding chair, which is kind of
you bring one. If they don't offer you a chair, you bring one.
Yeah, and again, you can also defend yourself with said folding chair. There's also there's kind of a class dimension to this too that I wanted to hit on. And again, this isn't something I've really seen talked about. A lot of media outlets have been covering this. I mentioned that the steamboat that was trying to park was municipally owned versus this pontoon boat. So you've got this kind of white petty bourgeois sense of entitlement. I bought this boat. I could park it wherever I want. It's this idea that it's this individualism, American individualism. It's like I can do whatever I want wherever I want because I have enough money to do so. I own apparently one of the white families is tied to a local convenience store. Versus again this municipally owned boat. It's owned by the city, and it's for the residents of Birmingham to enjoy. It's for the people there who live in the city to go enjoy the river, with their fellow citizens. So again, it's this idea of kind of the white propertied middle class strata directly telling working class people on the steamboat, mostly Black working class people, you can't park your bigger boat here because I don't want to move just because I feel no sense of just civic politeness to do so. And it's
why would I do that? I'm a capital owner.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I have capital. It's like the big boat is for you peasants,
yeah.
But as it turns out, you can buy a pontoon boat with money, but you can't buy hearts and minds, which is kind of illustrated by the fact that they got swarmed by people coming to the defense of the boat captain and got their course corrected.
To put it one way.
You can buy a boat, but you can't buy hands.
Buy a boat, but you can't buy hands. Much more succinctly.
Right. You can buy a boat, but you need to know how to throw hands. That's the thing. If you start, it goes back like this is me and Andy. We're hip hop heads. and this is the 50th year anniversary of hip hop.
Happy birthday to hip hop.
And yeah, oh, I did not know. I did not know, Nor. Me and you haven't had that conversation. But one of the things in hip hop, or one of the sayings in hip hop, that's one of the most famous things in the world that was said, especially in our generation when me and Andy was growing up, especially in high school. The Young Bloods came out with a song with one of the greatest producers of all time, Lil Jim, and in the song they would say, "Don't start no stuff. It won't be no stuff."
Sage
That's
wisdom. Maybe
well
we should be
said.
listening to that on the pontoon boat.
Right.
Yeah.
we was listening to that. We was listening to that back at high school. Don't start no stuff. Won't be no stuff. And they don't. That's how you know they don't listen to hip hop. They don't know. They don't know that golden rule.
Actually, I do want to hit on that real quick, just because I feel I don't want to pass this auspicious anniversary without really saying something about it on our program. But yeah, as Lawrence mentioned, 50th anniversary of hip hop, and yeah, for at least my part, and I feel like this probably applies to a lot of our listeners out there. People have asked me over the years, especially since I've really kind of stepped up my game as a community organizer, like, who are some of your biggest political influences growing up? And it wasn't Karl Marx, it wasn't Bernie Sanders, it wasn't Noam Chomsky or Cornel West, or when I was like in middle school, when I was first starting to think about politics, um, Public Enemy, Fight the Power, listening to those songs, listening to those lyrics. Um, and even, looking at like the early 90s where, you had NWA songs like F the Police, which if you were at any demonstration in 2020, you may have heard that song. Um,
A lot.
but hip hop was directly responsible for politicizing a generation of people, including yours truly. And people have talked about how, would, so the 2020 uprising against police brutality were the biggest protests in American history. And hip hop played a really crucial role in that, especially the way you are seeing way more. And I was kind of talking about this with some friends of mine because I was just reading. So I just got done reading Settlers, and that's a whole other topic. I'm not, give the idea of white people's the white working class and their allegiance to the broader kind of settler colonial project and to racism. And what you saw with hip hop, and I really think it had a big role in kind of inoculating a generation. And granted, hip hop was created by Black culture. I don't want to downplay that. We could spend some time talking about how it is a working people's music. It was literally created in the disinvested Bronx, in the wake
So
of historic disinvestments and ghettoization. But I'll just
let me
finish my
let me
let me
go
finish
ahead,
my
go ahead, go
thought
ahead,
and
go
I'll
ahead, go
kick
ahead,
it to
go
you.
ahead, go ahead.
But hip hop, I think, in a big way, was responsible for inoculating a generation of white kids like me who loved hip hop against buying in to that colonial settler nonsense. So by the time 2020 comes along, you see like tons of people. There's a lot of BLM protests where it was mostly in white towns. It was all these young white people who learned to understand politics and the history of police brutality and brutality against Black people through that music. And so much of what we're seeing right now with like the attacks on critical race theory and trying to get banned books and stuff is the reactionaries looking at the solidarity those white kids had with their Black friends in 2020 and being scared poopless, to use radio friendly language, which again, I think we can foist a lot of the credit to that, artists like KRS-One, Public Enemy, Ice Cube, The Roots, more recently Run the Jewels. I could go on and on and on.
Kendrick Lamar.
Kendrick Lamar, yeah.
All right, so to break down to add to that, yes, there are some things that you definitely said. Lupe Fiasco, I like to put in there. Talib Kweli, Mos Def, Common.
Even some Megan Thee Stallion, honestly.
There's Immortal Technique.
Oh yeah.
The late great MF Doom. We can keep going. We can keep going on.
But Immortal Technique is a brilliant, like U.S. imperialism 101. Like it's
if you haven't listened to it, like Immortal Technique. I'm glad you talked about Run the Jewels. We can keep going. For me, a lot of my political awakening, especially when it's tied to hip hop, one of my favorite memories, even though I didn't agree with everything that a lot of his political stances, one of my favorite people that I liked listening to when it came to hip hop and politics was Lupe Fiasco, especially during the Obama administration when he came up with Words Unsaid, one of my favorite songs of that man's legacy. Even people like Eminem. Eminem came out with multiple songs that had politics in it. March, when he's going directly going after George W. Bush, his freestyle against Donald Trump at the BET Awards. There are multiple times when politics and the way we look at the world has been framed through the lens and the medium of hip hop. And a lot of times, and I've had to talk about this with some of my other friends about as one of the greatest of all time once said, LL Cool J, to quote him, America likes our rhythm, but it doesn't like our blues. So when it comes to us talking about expressing how we got to where we are, why we are here, and being more accountable in the civil aspects of being in politics and things of that nature, it bothers people. I remember when think about someone like Scarface, who a Southern rapper who ends up becoming a politician, and all the things and his lyrics and his songs being used against him when he was running for office. Oops, one of my favorite battle rappers from St. Louis. He's on the front line during Ferguson and stuff like that. And him as a battle rapper, the stuff that he's been saying being used against him. Like there's so many things that when it comes to artists and how we connect to other people and in using politics and talking about the social unrest, the injustice and the resilience of our community and that connecting with other disenfranchised community. It's very much an echo of the Black Panther Party and those different coalitions of us being a melting pot. And yes, coming from Black culture, coming from disenfranchised people, but spreading and reaching and connecting with others who also are being held down by the same system. It's a beautiful thing. And for those who don't know, just quick sidebar, hip hop is a culture. If anybody tells you any different, they don't know hip hop. Hip hop is not just rap. It is a culture. It's something that you live. It's something that you breathe. It's something that you are. During the late 60s, early 70s, if you don't know American history, there was a lot of gang wars and a lot of disenfranchised violence and political violence that was going on in New York City. So a lot of some great minds came together. They stole public electricity and they started throwing park jams and through parties to bring these different communities in New York together. in the Bronx, in all over. It was the media that coined the term hip hop because of I don't know if it was Curtis Blow. I don't think it was Curtis Blow, or it was African Bambaataa. It was one of those two. And they asked him, what is that y'all doing? And he called it hip hop. He called it and the media coined that and ran with it. But yeah, there are 4 core principles. There are 5 elements. Just give me a real quick rundown. The 4 core principles is peace, love, unity, and having fun. If anybody tells you different, they don't know what they're talking about. And if they, in the 5 elements is the dance, the writing, which is graffiti. You have the DJ, the MC, and then the history. If you don't know where you're coming from, you don't know where you're going. You cannot tell me you're creating something new if you don't know what came before. So that is the bare minimum that you need to know if you want to know anything about it. But yeah, I can keep going on, but we ain't on that right now. But yeah, if you want to see a really good hip hop political podcast, The People's Party by Talib Kweli. If you have not seen or heard that podcast and seen how they break down stuff, how he breaks down stuff, how he connects punk culture and how punk culture was like Rage Against the Machine, and the reason why like Rage Against the Machine and Wu-Tang Clan back in '95 went on tour together. The reason why a lot of those suburban kids, a lot of those different communities with like self-destruction during KRS-One and all that era, and how the different eras shaped and reflected American culture at the time. So much wonderful things. So many wonderful things. I can keep going on. But yeah.
I think
due diligence.
I just have a couple of recommendations for folks. One book that really changed my life and thinking about the relationship between art, culture, and politics. Can't Stop, Won't Stop by Jeff Chang. It's kind of the perennial history of hip hop text. And then I would also say, so Chuck D recently put out a documentary with PBS, Fight the Power, kind of timing around that anniversary. And it was Fight the Power, How Hip Hop Changed the World. And I would say it is essential viewing if you love hip hop, if you're a leftist, if you're both, because it really does talk about that intersection of American politics and history and hip hop. So.
Oh, and also the Nas. I cannot forget. Nas had a whole thing with the 50th year anniversary, putting different shows together. Some selective hearing or selective listening that I would tell you I would suggest to you that you should listen to. If you haven't listened to Nas Illmatic, if you haven't listened to King's
classic.
Disease. Yeah, if you haven't listened to any of the King's Disease albums, 1, 2, or 3, or Magic 1 and 2. If you haven't listened to Food and Liquor by Lupe, or The Cool by Lupe, like there's a couple. Common, any of Common's albums, all of them.
Pimp a Butterfly.
All right, To Pimp a Butterfly. Actually, I'm gonna be honest with you. I think Kendrick's last album, Mr. Moral, I feel like, especially because again.
Oh yeah, no, that previous album too. You're right.
Mr. Moral, damn, To Pimp a Butterfly, Mad City. But I think Mr. Moral's and the Big Stepper. That's my favorite album. Also, Wale and J. Cole. I love a lot of their albums as well. Like, oh my god.
In the early 2000s, Kanye's music was more political in the correct direction.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
That's at least worth mentioning.
Kanye's Late Registration, Kanye's College Dropout and Late Registration are classic albums. And Champion. Champion's also a classic album.
Yeah, for Gen Z folks, it is kind of hard. I mean, maybe if you're a little older, you were like, yeah, he used to be a lot more. I mean, he called out George W. Bush on national television in 2005.
Yeah.
Oh, dog, are you?
I've heard of
Are you
it.
kidding me? Spaceship till this day is one of my favorite Kanye West songs. As a person who works third shift, as a third shift employee,
Yeah.
if you haven't listened to Spaceship or worked in retail, then that song hits different. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Oh my god. I mean, Jay-Z's later albums, like 444 by Jay-Z is one of my favorite albums of all time, even though Reasonable Doubt is an absolute classic. And also females in hip hop. Remy Ma, Lil Kim, Eve, Missy Elliott. Missy Elliott was inducted into the Writers Hall of Fame, and she's only one of four hip hop artists that's in the Writers Hall of Fame. She's the only black female
Hmm.
that as a hip hop artist
I
that's
say
in the Writers Hall of Fame.
I listened to a lot of Queen Latifah growing up. I think she was really notable being one of the first big artists who was kind of challenging some of the late misogyny that was going on in the culture at the time.
Oh,
And
dog.
you gotta tip your
Unity.
hat to that. Yeah.
Unity. What?
Hmm.
Dog. Queen Latifah is legendary. MC Light's legendary. Little Kim, Lauryn Hill. Lauryn Hill to this day. Lauryn Hill only put out one album, but the miseducation of outside of the Fugees, the miseducation of Lauryn Hill,
Ooh, the
which
Fugees.
she
I love the
did put out.
Fugees.
She put out other music. Oh yeah, Foodies, absolutely. She
Hmm.
put out other music outside of that. But the Miseducation is one of the greatest hip hop albums. It's just albums of all time, not just hip hop. One of the greatest albums of all time.
Hmm.
Like legendary stuff.
Now,
Actually, I was going to say before we change to the next subject, can you give one or two hip hop songs and or political songs that you rock with?
ooh, like it really like influenced me because, hmm, you know,
For me, I'll start off.
uh,
Talib Kweli's "Get By." If you haven't heard Talib Kweli's "Get By" in the remix with Jay-Z and Busta Rhymes, like when I was younger, that and Dilated Peoples with Kanye West, uh, This Way. Those two songs, especially when I was younger, I was like that. Those songs hit different when I was listening to.
I so the two that came to mind for me, so it's like, let's just say like I probably heard "Fight the Power" first time when I was a little kid, just watching MTV, but it didn't really stick with me. It wasn't until shout out to my friend Barson, which I think two of us know.
Marshall Miller, shout out to
Yeah,
Marshall Miller.
yeah, but he forced me to dig a little deeper in that catalog. Black Steel and the Hour of Chaos, which if you don't understand mass incarceration or the relationship of the federal government to black movements, that song is a fantastic primer on that stuff. And before I knew what capitalism was, or it was really in my lexicon, one thing I did know is that cash rules everything around me,
Cream get the
and that
money.
money
Dollar
comes
dollar
first.
Dollar
bill,
bill.
y'all.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, no.
yeah.
Also, we talked about NWA. I mean, obviously, you know, I don't like Ice Cube's latest interview with Tucker Carlson. That's a totally different
Oh
conversation.
no,
Ooh,
that also
yeah.
happens.
Oh boy,
Yeah, yeah. Like people again. There's other things that we could talk. There's other things. That's a different conversation. But yeah, after police. Yeah.
Nora, maybe was it two songs that maybe had a hit you? Maybe some that were really like important in your political development. Or,
Yeah, so I think it's hard to say like which hip hop songs were important in my to my hip hop development specifically, my political development specifically, because like I think I mean I'm a bit on the younger side. I didn't necessarily grow up with hip hop, so I think the first like hip hop song that like really like hit me politically was F the Police. It really like, paints a picture of just how antagonistic the police are to like the black population of this country, and how yeah, F them. Like they
Mhm.
shouldn't be in our neighborhoods like this. It's not okay. It's simple, it's to the point. It's yeah, it's a classic.
All right, so let's pivot now. So what I think one of the bands we mentioned was Rage Against the Machine, and so let's talk a little bit about the Machine and what the Machine is doing. So we're gonna go hop from the Bronx back here to the Mitten, specifically Detroit. Although this has implications for Kalamazoo, we're gonna talk about artificial intelligence and this recent story that came out. So there was a woman in Detroit who was falsely indicted by the city of Detroit for a crime they did not commit based on faulty facial recognition technology. And this woman, she had to like take the Detroit police to court um, and like prove her case. She had the backing of the ACLU of Michigan, but it was Portia Woodruff. Um, she was arrested in February while trying to get her children ready for school. She was identified as a suspect in a January robbery and carjacking through facial recognition technology. Of course, she denied it because she had absolutely nothing to do with that crime. Um, and she sued the department, and what some good has come out of it is so they're going to be creating new policies about the use of facial recognition technology. What those new policies are going to be, we'll see. But this does open up a broader discussion topic, and I know we've talked a little bit about AI and stuff before, but um,
Andy, hold on, wait. I have to read this. This is coming from directly from the article. If anybody that wants to read this article, it's coming from Channel 3. The chief, James White, said the technology, which was used on images taken from a gas station video, produced leads in the case, but was followed by very poor police work. You tried to minority report this situation, and you arrested the wrong person. Like you.
That's okay. To draw a parallel, that's like a lot of similar stuff to what happened in the Breonna Taylor case back in Kentucky. How the cops did like everything wrong. They went to the wrong apartment. They like shot through like multiple people's walls, and they killed this woman who was sleeping. Like just an incredible failure on every level. And I think that like is very similar as to what is happening here. Again, they're racially profiling a black woman. This time she was pregnant, and they felt the need to send 6 police officers to come serve her warrants and bring her into jail. She was 8 months pregnant, no less. Like you read her watch her interview on Democracy Now. She'll talk about.
Can you say that one more time? She was 8 months pregnant.
Yes, I believe so.
She didn't have a baby bump. Like it wasn't that she was barely showing. No, she was pregnant.
She was like, pregnant.
Right.
8 months.
So like, do you know what kind of trauma that outside of just the fact that most black men, a large portion of black men can die during childbirth more than the average their white counterparts. But what kind of stress, emotional, mental stress you are putting on this pregnant woman?
Yeah, and like she talks also in the interview about how she was really dehydrated when they finally like took her to the hospital, and she didn't eat enough food because she said the food that they would give her there, like she wouldn't feed it to her dog. It's just really horrific treatment for like for like getting picked wrong for an AI technology that is one like clearly AI facial recognition still has a long way to go before it's could be reliable for anything, but it's especially poor for identifying people of color compared to the way that AI would white faces, because AI and technology in general is a reflection of the society that creates it. Now, I work in technology, so like I know this in a lot of ways firsthand. There's a lot of optimization for technology that helps businesses make line go up. For example, like police AI technology is going to just continue to be racist in a way that humans might not even be necessarily.
The AI is biased towards their creator. They
exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Also, at the same time, if you're a police officer, do you think a pregnant woman is carjacking somebody?
Yeah, and she already has 2 cars. Like, why would you?
But Lawrence, the smart computer Skynet thing said so. So and that's another part of it is this
we live,
I
kind
can't
of
draw hands, but
we live in a society, like I've said this before on the show. We live in a society where we have smartphones but dumb people, and that will always, and that's only getting worse when we're also talking about people who have a license to kill.
yeah,
That will get
and
worse.
so it's a toxic soup of like again, there's this belief in the infallibility of this technology that and like most scientists have said, like this stuff is not reliable, and a lot of people have advocated you should not be using this technology for this, particularly because I'm kind of going back to a few technical points. These recognition technologies generally are bad at recognizing people with darker skin tones and differentiating them as individuals. Uh,
exactly.
we also have compound that with the problem the way these algorithms are designed. Um, we have a historically racist policing. These algorithms depend on all of this data that we built up over the decades of largely racist policing. So the types of people and the types of neighborhoods that these crime detection algorithms are going to go after are going to be predominantly working class Black people. And there's, again, not really a recognition of that kind of danger in the technology. The way we are basically programming these algorithms to act in a systemically racist way, like literally, because it is a system that is acting racist. Um, but yeah, um, and
I have to go, but
okay.
I just wanted to say before I dipped out. Look, if you're a police officer and you think someone has carjacked, did a carjacking, this person owns 2 vehicles and they're pregnant, then maybe you can do a little bit of police work, detective, critical thinking, process of elimination. There's a lot of things that you learn in elementary school that could help you identify that some of these things are not matching up. One of these things is not like the other. And a pregnant woman stealing a car, it's not one of them. It's just it's very unlikely. Will we put that as very unlikely, or just like not reasonable? Like, come on, y'all, do better, y'all should get donkey today. I think that probably did get donkey today. It should get donkey today. But I gotta go, y'all. Love y'all. Peace.
All right,
And all that good stuff.
Later,
Lawrence.
Lawrence.
Yeah, thanks for joining us on the program. Um, okay, I've got a few kind of wrap up thoughts about this story, and I think part of it is you've seen a lot of people from the tech world really ringing alarm bells about AI lately. It's an existential threat on par with nuclear weapons or climate change. And so we're basically talking about these scenarios that have been well trodden in a lot of science fiction of creating a generalized AI that outpaces human consciousness and starts to view humanity as an existential threat and like, oh no, then poof goes the humans. Um, and not to say that isn't possibility somewhere out there, but it also kind of ignores the present of how AI technologies are being misused. And so pointing to what happened to this woman in Detroit, and we've got similar stories, all over the country of ways people have been applying AI technology that feeds into systemic oppression, or and ironically, again, you have these big rich tech people like Elon Musk who are suddenly very concerned about AI taking over while basically training its own algorithms and profit making mechanisms to engage in that kind of racism that is at the core of the problem of with the AI technologies we're just talking about. And also like just somebody who's a big nerd, like you know it's really ironic to me to watch people like these billionaires crow about the danger of this potential like AI uprising when at the core of so many of those stories they were a commentary on the very human systems of their time. Terminator comes to mind. I love that movie. The first two.
Oh yeah, those were
The other's
fantastic.
number two.
I think the
Um,
first RoboCop also was like
yeah.
a commentary on how, like, dehumanizing and like machine like the police already are as they exist,
hmm Yeah, so in both the Terminator movies, James Cameron has actually said this. It's like it's a critique of capitalism. That's the system that he's talking about that like dehumanizes it all. Like Skynet is an allegory for that. And then in Terminator
Also the
2,
Matrix.
yeah, yeah. In Terminator 2, a lot of people, it came out in 91. This was the time of of contention, Rodney King, etc. Um, and coding like the main bad Terminator as an LA cop was not an accident.
Yep.
And yeah, again, these stories are supposed to reflect back to us about the danger of putting our faith into amoral, evil systems. It's not supposed to warn you about literal robots that are literally going to take over.
Right. I think I think the possibility of literal robots taking over is still a couple of years ahead of us now. But like a lot of a lot of the rich tech MFs that will talk about the dangers of AI are still actively investing in it. Like Meta has an AI, Google's like investing in AI, Microsoft's investing, like every major tech company is investing in AI in some capacity or another. And it's mostly so that they can like optimize things for their own business. So they can lay more people off even beyond what's been happening in the past couple of years. So and for the most part, they're not doing it to like, try to like at least unless contracted through a third party to like enact violence upon others. Although it is worth mentioning that Amazon Web Services is a major cloud provider of the U.S., the feds, the military, and so I think that's where we might see more of a risk in terms of AI doing some really scary stuff. I think there was an example. I don't know if I did an article for this of like some sort of like AI drone operator
Yeah,
that was designed to like eliminate targets and also eliminate anything that would stop somebody from attacking the targets.
mhm.
And something like it was somehow prompted like I'm going to destroy the communication tower so that a human won't try to stop me from blowing something up that the robot would want to. Like that was probably the scariest AI thing I've seen so far. Um, and like that also the fact that we need like protection, like AI protections for workers in general, which is why this Hollywood strike is so important, and that we can get those kind of protections. um yeah, that's like for artists specifically, that's going to be huge,
Yeah,
which is
and
I guess kind of ties into the horrific irony of so many people using AI to generate art or writing prompts, while every like humans are still expected to perform menial labor that should, theoretically be better done by robots.
hmm And I think, not to downplay that. I think there is a really solid point in the need to regulate AI in the same way countries have done to like nuclear weapons and nuclear technology, because there's it's accidental stuff, and people are being really stupid with it. Like you don't want to give an untested AI weapons or weaponry or access to technology that could kill people, because like scenarios like you just mentioned could happen. And it's really going to be, it is a race between capitalism versus common sense. And if the worst types of capitalists are at the forefront of AI technology, then we're going to see the worst futures emerge from that. And as far as like the big sci-fi humans versus robots scenario, that's not something I think most leftists should really worry about. Um, my whole thing has always been like, hey, if the AI merges, we should ask, like, is it fascist or socialist, and then plan accordingly. And of course, the big danger is if AI is being, kind of the push for AI is being led by people like Elon Musk, it's probably not going to be a socialist general intelligence. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's, I imagine art like just the Terminator coming. It's like, why can't I just say what I want? Everybody's so woke now. Yeah, yeah,
Cancel
yeah.
this.
Let's cancel this. Okay. Again, we'll link to all the relevant articles in the show notes. Nora, what did you want to hit on next? We've got a couple of things to hit on. Talk briefly about Ohio. I know. So the article that you just brought up about I was actually
The
talking with
AI
another
drone.
colleague.
I did some more reading on it just now, and it looks
Yeah.
like that wasn't actually a thing that happened in an Air Force test, thankfully. But
Oh,
they
okay.
said it was more of a thought experiment. But still, I think that the fact that how believable it was is pretty
Yeah.
telling as to what could possibly happen with this stuff.
So I'd say the two big stories I really want to hit on is what happened in Ohio, and then that story. I was actually discussing the story you shared with us with a colleague about the way, um, like anti-LGBTQ bigots aren't getting what they want out of science, so now they're trying to attack science itself. And I thought this was a really
Yes.
interesting article. Would you like to talk to listeners about that one next?
Yeah, so there was recently a study done to confirm that like regret rates for masculinizing mastectomies, aka top surgery for trans men, has a regret rate of like zero, like almost zero, if not like a fraction of a single percent. And it's making a lot of like TERFs and rightoids like lose their mind, and a lot of the same people who would like fly the same 6D transitioners around the country to try to ban gender affirming care. And now, perhaps unsurprisingly, it's making the right really mad at science in like really bizarre ways. Like, oh, like peer reviewed peer reviewed medicine's not real. Like this does not come to surprise me as all, because a lot of like right wingers will willfully like ignore science in terms of the fact that for example, there's like no meaningful differences between like people of different races. There's like abortion care is health care. Climate change is perhaps the most obvious example, but and they also use the myth of low quality evidence to on gender affirming care, but that's also ties into the fact that like the possibility of a control group for that sort of healthcare would be massively immoral, because it would require people to like not be medicated for it. Like the only way that would be possible is if someone like again were to get it banned somehow, which I think those same legislatures wouldn't want to allow that sort of study to be performed anyways.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to so right now this is in the context of this big reactionary backlash against trans people. Um, but you see this so often, as you alluded to, with anything the right generally disagrees with. And I think another pertinent example is remember a lot of the right-wing narratives around COVID-19, which is when they could cherry pick bits of science they liked, they would push that way
Right.
to the
Or they'll
forefront.
use or they'll create an alternative scientific institution that they could point to
Yeah,
in order to be like, oh, see, no, like there's
yeah.
disagreement here. And if and like I guess going back to the whole like high quality grade evidence under the grade system of like medical care, if like we only went off stuff based off that, we wouldn't have gallbladder surgery, we wouldn't have antidepressants, we wouldn't have radiation therapy, we wouldn't have mammograms. Just like so much parts of like widely accepted medical practice would not be in use today if it like we only did stuff that had like control groups.
Hmm. And it's also, kind of something that a tactic we talked about earlier was like taking a kernel of truth and then kind of misappropriating some wonky conclusions from it. So a lot of science is a big institution. A lot of it is funded by capitalists. Even go back to like so the COVID-19 conspiracies, like the real conspiracy was of course corporations like Pfizer's efforts to try to put profit before people when it came to the
Exactly.
vaccine. But what the right does is they point to the big scary institution and they kind of let people fill in the blanks. So, kind of what they're trying to say is like the science, the science is a little faulty and it has an agenda. The science has an agenda.
Hmm.
When, of course, the real agenda going on is them trying to conjure up something to prove their bigotry. Um, but yeah, they point to like these kind of some critiques that have happened of institutional science, and they twist them around in these kind of nonsensical shapes to try to fit whatever narrative that they're telling. In this case, trying to say that more trans people regret transitioning than the science is letting on,
Right.
which is not true. But
Yes.
yeah.
I think I think the all this like transphobia coming out of like the GOP specifically is like really like showing like really bad results for them electorally, even if it's able to convince enough people to like really go crazy. I think a good example of this is they try to tie it into the issue 1 in Ohio, where they tried to make it like so for a bit more context, they tried to put an issue 1 on a ballot in like some random day in August in Ohio that would make it harder for people in Ohio to do direct democracy, aka ballot initiatives, which they used specifically to prevent a ballot initiative that would have kept abortion rights on there. And surely enough, they use attack ads for it, be like, hey, if you don't make it harder to have democracy, then the transes will take over. Ooh. And remarkably, it caused them to lose by a rate of 57 to 43% in the election. Of course, abortion rights being hugely popular is another reason people are like, catching on to like the BS that is being pushed by, these fascists in Ohio. And yeah, it's really great to see people pushing back on all these awful things happening. But it's also like, I saw this like pointed out on a Hassan stream, how like the GOP is like the dog that caught the car with abortion rights. Like they were never actually supposed to eliminate Roe v. Wade, even though they've convinced their entire constituency that that's what's supposed to happen, because like they're supposed to always have an enemy that they can go against, and like passing all these draconian laws that will affect people like at least indirectly, if not directly, will make their own constituency turn on them, and people who are against them go even harder.
Yeah, exactly. And these type of inflammatory politics don't work when your goal is electoral. Because all you're doing is trying to inflame a base that already believes all of these things that you believe. You're not convincing new people that trans people are actually dangerous, or that, particularly so, opening it up to talk a little bit about the Ohio thing. It was interesting to me how, and I don't know, I guess our radio show broadcasts out of Michigan, so I don't know how if we're allowed to really speak positively about Ohio, but no, but
Props to them for doing this
yeah,
specifically.
yes, the voters there really saw through a lot of this propaganda that was again mostly aimed at like marginalized groups, and understood that GOP is trying to make it more difficult for people to exercise their rights. And I think one thing that wasn't discussed quite enough was one of the ways they wanted to make it harder. It wasn't just to increase it to a 60% supermajority. You also would need like a certain amount of signatures from every single county um, in the state. Now, we've all seen the blue red state maps, and what it would basically do is make it effectively impossible for something that was had like a partisan edge to it to be able to go citizens to go to a citizen's vote. And what that does, what if it had passed, what it essentially would have said is like people who live in the big cities of Ohio, i.e., like Cleveland, Columbus, etc. Why do all the cities start with
Cincinnati.
C? Cincinnati. All the cities start with C. That's a real
The
conspiracy.
conspiracy.
Yeah, but all the people in these cities who have larger, more liberal contingents would effectively have their voices blocked because you'd basically be saying, if we can't get every county, which for various reasons might have a political difference to you, then it's not going to pass. And by the way, even some people on the right thought this was short-sighted thinking, because the reverse would also be true. If you're trying to get some conservative ballot measure uh, on the ballot and you weren't able to say get enough people in Cincinnati to sign off on it, then yeah, that wouldn't go to a vote either. So some right-wing analysts, including John Kasich, the Republican governor, said this is short-sighted and this could come back to hurt us sometime in the future. But luckily, yeah, the voters of Ohio kind of saw through this very transparent tactic, which was really about trying to kind of take out the kneecaps of democracy in their state. And yeah, we saw a pretty impressive supermajority of people say, nah, no, we're not doing that. Not going to let that happen. Which bodes well because the GOP is trying to do this in various states across the country. There's a great article I'll link to in the show notes about this from I believe it was from Truth Out that really goes into detail about where and how Republicans are trying to make it harder for people to pass citizen-led ballot initiatives. But yeah, this is a good sign for things to come to see that even when Republicans and conservative uh, uh, propagandists try to twist this around, either trying to use marginalized groups or try to confuse the issue. People will be able to see through it. It's a positive sign.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really, really refreshing that people are activated even when the fascists that run our country are trying dirty tricks to make them not vote for one reason or another.
Mm-hmm. So I didn't have too much else on today's program. It's an older story, but I did at least want to hit on it because we were talking about government surveillance earlier in the program, and agent provocateurs. And there was an instance of that happened in Colorado Springs, where we had FBI agents infiltrating a local chapter of Black Lives Matter and deploying a lot of the same tactics and strategies that we talked about earlier. And
COINTELPRO and all
and
that.
COINTELPRO and all that, which again, first time listener, that was a program the FBI had the 60s and 70s to infiltrate leftist organizations and try to create infighting, instability, and sometimes try to incite them to commit terroristic acts so that they could be prosecuted. That's an important story. I think, again, it illustrates that this is still something that the government is very much doing in the present day. Um, I also I do want to say our thoughts, condolences, and our solidarity are with the people of Hawaii who are
Absolutely.
going through a terrible climate change fueled disaster right now. Um, Again, winds from a hurricane have caused these wildfires to just completely decimate mostly indigenous communities in Hawaii. And I will point to the general coverage of Democracy Now. They've been doing a really incredible job centering, particularly those indigenous voices. Because if you're going to do a little bit of media critique, I have seen uh, too many white Hawaiians being featured on CNN and business leaders and stuff connected to the tourist industry without centering the native people there who there's this heartbreaking story from Democracy Now about a community there that lost their tribal history and heritage center. And
Yeah, and the fact that Maui had the capital of the Hawaiian country before it was taken over by the US, and I can't imagine how much history would have been lost to climate change that was fueled by Western powers and their own colonizers to a great extent. But I have a link of how you can support the people of Maui. I did find an indigenous-led donation link that you guys can. We'll include that in the show notes. Yeah.
yeah, please do, and don't be like other oblivious excuse me, vacationers who are really there's been like some say if you follow that coverage, there's been discussions like just the jarring contradiction of like these white tourists coming to Hawaii to swim in the same waters that people were literally dying in a week ago. Um, if you know anybody going to Hawaii on vacation, tell them don't do it. Like
Yeah,
cancel your trip, get a
yeah.
refund, and send that money to like one maybe that mutual aid link or something. Because like you,
Or go travel somewhere
yeah,
else. Like there's so
yeah.
many other places. Like if you just want to go to the beach, there's places in Michigan.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's already been pre-existing critiques from Indigenous Hawaiians about Hawaii being treated as just like everybody's vacation dumpster, but
Hmm.
especially right
Yeah.
now, like just no, just there are ways to support Hawaii that don't involve you going there and having a daiquiri on the beach. Okay, yeah. All right. Okay, I think with that, Nora, is there anything else you want to talk about before we wrap things up?
That's it. I gotta go get dinner.
All right, same. And I think so we got a little bit more time if you're listening on the radio show. So I think I'm gonna fill the rest of our space. It's 50th anniversary of hip hop, so I'm gonna play some politically charged hip hop music for the listeners at home. But if you're online, again, subscribe, share us out. We've got a podcast, we've got a YouTube page. Tell your friends about us. Again, that's how we spread this important local coverage that we do out of wider. Thank y'all for listening, and until next time, keep on fighting for that revolution solution.